Hey everybody, I'm Eric Hendricks with Camo. I'm here with Brooks Johnson, the president of Minnesota Bow Hunters Incorporated, and he also owns Minnesota Deer Density Initiative that he started back in 2013. So we're going to touch base a little bit with his Minnesota Deer Density Initiative, kind of give you a little bit of background on Brooks, and then we're going to jump into the CWD, which has kind of been the hot topic here in Minnesota. So first off, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first question I'd like to ask to give people a background on you is, why did you start Minnesota Deer Density Initiative?
The Deer Density Initiative has to do with trying to add some transparency and accountability to the doings of the Minnesota Deer Team, the department of the DNR that manages the white-tailed deer, and we felt they weren't being completely forthright with the information and the quality of some of the information they had. We had concerns, so a group of people from central Minnesota that were felt there were some things going on that might need some change, and got together, and we just went to work and we hit hard. We went after the DNR looking for accountability and transparency.
Okay. I know one of the things was giving hunters a say in goal setting. I know that was a big hot topic too, and was one part of it. Why do you think, or I should ask, are the hunters of Minnesota now, do we have a voice? Are we gaining a voice?
You have a voice, but the Minnesota DNR doesn't operate on the exact same playing field that a lot of other state game agencies do, in that we don't really have anybody that oversees them. So our DNR can largely do what it wants to do under instruction from the commissioner. So the commissioner is appointed from the governor, and the commissioner is really the one that steers direction for the Minnesota DNR. And no matter how upset the deer hunters of Minnesota get with the DNR over potential issues, they're their own body. They're basically the three branches of government almost by themselves. So we have a voice, but ultimately the DNR can decide what they want to do at will.
So our neighboring states, Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, they all have amazing deer hunting. I've hunted other states, and they're able to, or they choose to have a higher deer population, higher deer densities. And I look at their habitat, and I look at our habitat, and I think we have way better habitat than, say, Iowa, Wisconsin, the Dakotas. Why is our DNR so reluctant to have higher deer populations in Minnesota, in your theory?
I can't answer that completely. Sometimes some of the other states do have higher deer numbers, not by design, but the people, the hunters of those states have spoken and said we're not going to tolerate managing for those lower deer numbers. They've taken it upon themselves to, through their actions and through their words, to make sure that their states aren't managed for those low deer numbers. And for some reason, here in Minnesota, call it Minnesota Nice, call it whatever you want, the hunters seem to more readily follow along with things that they're not super happy with, and they get along to go along sometimes, it seems, more often than not. I don't know why that is. Maybe that's why the Packers got Super Bowl rings and the Vikings don't. You know? But no, but I've tried to figure that out too, but it seems like the Minnesota hunters are a lot more subject to regulation from the DNR, and it seems to have more of an effect here than it does in some of the other states, and it happens that way. I can't even answer that question. I wish I knew the answer.
Right, so their mentality in those states, a lot of the hunters just choose to manage their own deer herd.
Hey, definitely. Yeah, you can look back to the Wisconsin CWD numbers that we'll talk about later, and that's what, hunter distrust and angst over lower deer numbers in that state actually led to possibly a governor getting elected to flip that whole thing upside down. So yeah, that large collective public voice over there in Wisconsin completely changed the whole Wisconsin DNR over there. I don't know if that'll ever happen here in Minnesota. If it had to or not, I don't know.
So you mentioned CWD. You saw the interview that Tim did with Lou Cornison. Mm-hmm. There was things that I didn't personally agree with. But is there anything, what do you think the scariest thing that he said during that interview? What are some things that just didn't sit well with you?
Well, I think there's some cherry-picked, misrepresented facts, but the scariest thing for me from the CW thing down in southeast Minnesota is the deer groups down there have not stepped up to identify a line in the sand that says our CWD response plan is not doing what we asked it to do. Right now, what's going to happen down in southeast Minnesota is if we find new positives, that 603 zone is going to continue to expand. And every time we find another CWD positive deer down in that zone, we have 3 more years of not protecting antlerless or not protecting yearling bucks, and we have 3 more years of very aggressive deer management, which is probably going to involve sharpshooting over corn piles down there, which is a very effective way to lower the deer numbers. So it's kind of losing track of where I'm going with that, but my concern is that's the direction we're heading. And Lou said his line in the sand, if you ask for a line in the sand, say, when do we say this isn't working, we're going to try something else. And Lou said, if CWD becomes scattered across the landscape in southeast Minnesota, we're going to go into a management mode. We might not monitor as much, but we're going to manage for it. What that management means is it means no yearling buck protection, because we don't want to add age to any section of the deer herd. And yearling buck protection obviously makes bucks get older. We don't want that to mitigate the spread. It's also going to mean very low deer densities. And while Lou doesn't want to give a number on what those deer densities would be, I can tell you that in 2002 when Wisconsin went through this, they're looking at 8, 9, 10 deer per square mile. That's 1 adult deer for every 60 acres, okay? The aerial survey down there said, and I can't pin down the numbers because they haven't released it yet, but I've heard somewhere between 24 and 32 deer per square mile in that CWD zone. I don't think Lou's going to say the number, but if history and science are what he's using based upon some of these other things, you're looking at a 50 to 66% reduction in the deer herd over time down there. And I think that will be in perpetuity. As long as we continue to occasionally find CWD positives, which has happened in every other state, we're going to keep those numbers at that level. Those are almost unhuntable deer levels.
Wow. In that interview, he said nobody wants to talk about Illinois. And I know me personally, I would love to have talked about Illinois, and I know you would too, so by all means.
I'll talk about Illinois. There are 28, I think it's 28 affected states. That might include the Canadian provinces that have CWD, 24 or 28. 2 states have chosen to aggressively cull the herd. Illinois did it first start in 2002. We look like we had some success with it in Pine Island with 1 deer back in 2010. Now Minnesota's going to try to chase that Illinois model. Illinois has gone from 2 to 16 counties that are CWD positive. Illinois has CWD prevalence over 15% in some of their hot zones now. Illinois, last I checked, has a higher CWD prevalence than the part of Wisconsin that mirrors it by the borderline. Wisconsin monitors it, Illinois chases it aggressively. I don't think the Illinois story is a success when I look at that. And if you say that we're going down to Illinois Road and that's what Minnesota wants to do, chase that same model, that's showing you that that CWD zone is going to spread and expand. And it, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, I think all of Zone 3 will be Zone 603, low deer numbers, no yearling buck protection.
Another thing I wanted to touch on too. What do you think the biggest, like when the DNR states facts about CWD, what do you think, do you have any issues with the ones that they're stating are facts that the DNR is coming out with?
I really believe they have a chance to say they're trying to do the right thing. And the story they tell, if next year and the year after we come out of this and we don't have any more CWD positives with heavy surveillance, that's awesome. They've accomplished their goal, But their goal right now is they have to give the public the information they want to give them to try to get them to follow along with the plan they have, which is it's a big herd reduction down there. And because of that, I think sometimes some of the facts they choose to use are cherry picked. If there's one thing about CWD is it's very misunderstood. Nobody knows a lot about it. There are no real experts. We know there's no cure, but there's a lot of unknowns about it. And when we use some of the facts that, like, we might say some of the Wisconsin counties have 50% CWD positives in their mature bucks right now. That's not accurate data. That's data. Wisconsin doesn't collect data the same way they used to. It's on a voluntary basis by the hunters. The hunters I talked to there if they shoot a deer they think might be sick, they're bringing in for testing. They're bringing in the highest prevalence, the ones that are going to have the highest prevalence. They're bringing in those older bucks. They're bringing in those older does. They want to make sure, some of those people at least, that that animal doesn't have CWD. But just because 30 or 40% of the deer test positive for the disease that are being brought in, that's not a random sampling of that entire area. That's a sampling of the animals that are brought in for testing, so that's not completely accurate. We can look at how one Wyoming study is being quoted quite frequently as saying we have proof that there is going to be widespread herd declines caused by CWD. One person in Wyoming wrote about that. The peer review wasn't great. Are they right? I don't know. Are they wrong? I don't know. But I can tell you there are also studies out there that point to genetic resistance to the disease. I can tell you about places out in different wintering ranges of that same state that say the elk on those wintering ranges are showing a 41% resistance to the disease, which means they're not saying they're never going to get it, but they're not getting it until they're an older age. And when they get it, they're living a lot longer when they have it. So all these things, anybody that's got an agenda, agenda is a strong word, but anybody that is trying to use CWD to help them accomplish something, including myself, can find fact sets to share. And what's hard is that the DNR PR machine is a very difficult machine to overcome. It's very difficult. You don't have the media reach that they have. They do a press release, and all the newspapers pick it up and they print it verbatim. We don't have that. So it's important, right or wrong, maybe the DNR can be successful doing this. Maybe we have 3 years again, and we go like the Pine Island thing where they don't pop up. I'm going to guess we're going to find more CWD positives. I'm going to guess that's going to lead to the zone expanding. Very low deer numbers, perhaps half of what you guys are used to hunting down there, perhaps further than that. And as that zone expands, your APRs that everybody loves socially, I'd love to have them in my hunting zone. I mean, I love chasing older bucks. I would love to have them. I don't want anybody to think I am anti-APR because I'm not. But encouraging age structure on animals it just runs smack in the face of CWD mitigation.
I think a lot of people in Minnesota have this idea that APRs were put in to get bigger deer. But what they don't really know is why were APRs?
Well, you can find press releases both ways, but APRs do promote age structure on bucks.
Yes.
The reason that they were brought into southeast Minnesota was to put more pressure on the doe herd. They weren't brought in for the social reasons. That's why everybody loves them. The reason APRs were brought to Minnesota is because they have pockets of animals down there with too many bucks. If they force a hunter to pass on a young buck, there's a good chance that same guy's going to shoot the doe that comes by next. Or, if a buck and a doe come in together, and he can't shoot the buck, he's going to shoot the doe. So, it was brought in as a biological tool to force hunters to put more pressure on the doe herd to reduce the deer numbers. It resulted in some phenomenal pockets of hunting down there, there's no question. But I would not agree that they were brought in to promote this. They were brought in to reduce the deer numbers.
So in Lou's interview, he talked about the reason Wisconsin was different from Minnesota was that they suspect that they had CWD for 15 years prior to them finding it. What do you think about that?
When I look at that, nobody knows how long it's been there. Maybe it's been here forever. Okay, but when they went into Wisconsin in 2002 and they started testing these animals and they started finding some positives. Early on in the game, they come up with a prevalence rate. Okay, the percentage of the population that has the disease. And I didn't look up all the data in Wisconsin. I looked up one place in Iowa County, which is that's the endemic zone for Wisconsin. That's where they have these huge numbers. And in 2002, it was about a 1.4, 1.5% prevalence rate. Okay, right now in CWD zone 603 in southeast Minnesota, it's 0.92. Okay, we're sitting at a 0.92% prevalence rate. So if Wisconsin had it for 15 years, and when they started testing, they first found it at 1.5%, and we haven't had it for 15 years, and we're at a 0.92%, to me that's rough. And what you have to consider is this additional testing we're doing. Lou wants to test 900 more adult deer. That's going to give him 99% confidence in what our prevalence rate in the state of Minnesota is. Okay, he's going to be 99% confident what the prevalence rate is. So if we already have 3 CWD wild deer that we found in the state of Minnesota, And all of our testing down there in the CWD zone is going to represent maybe 20 or 25% of the adult animals. Okay? That means 75% of the adult animals are untested. And if you use that 99% certainty, we got 9 more that are out there. Okay? If we end up finding 10 deer with CWD with this new testing, we got 30 deer that are left out in the field after all the testing is done that have CWD. So where do we put that line in the sand that says it's here and we're not going to get rid of it? When do we change the program that says instead of a 10-mile radius, we shrink it down to a quarter-mile radius and try to kill them all? When do we say we're just going to have to live with it, and how many deer per square mile are we going to live with? Those are questions that need to be asked by the hunters of southeast Minnesota, because what you're signing up for right now by agreeing to this program, by not asking the questions, and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. Lou might have this whipped. We might never find a CWD incidence again in the state of Minnesota. But history says, and the odds say, that because we already found 3, this is not Pine Island, that the disease is probably out there. Those are the questions the hunters of southeast Minnesota really have to be asking, because we're setting ourselves up for something that we're going to roll forward with for the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, definitely. I know there is a meeting in the southeast coming up here in February.
Yep, February 8th.
Is that open to the public?
Open to the public, yep. It's going to be in Chatfield. They're renting, I don't know what the matinee is, but it's really nice seating. It's like the theater seating, 700 people. And it's going to be Kroll's, James Kroll's going to put it on. Hogan from North American Hunter is going to be the moderator for it. Is it North American Hunter, deer hunting? I can't remember. But Dr. James Kroll is going to, he will tell you a different side of the story than Lou Cornicelli is going to tell you, okay? Scale of 1 to 10, Lou's going to be here, Kroll's going to be out here, okay? The truth is somewhere here in the middle, okay? Somewhere here in the middle. But the deer hunting leaders of the state of Minnesota should pay attention to what Lou says. A lot of what he says is right. They should pay attention to what Kroll says. A lot of what he says he's right. But we have to find our way in the middle here to make sure this isn't a political issue that's potentially solved over here, or a game farm issue that's potentially solved over here. If it's a political issue, we need to get involved and find out and keep our head out of the sand and make sure we're not listening to either one of these guys 100%. We got to find our way to find, so as this thing moves forward, rolls forward, changes, that we're not blindsided and go, I wish I'd have known that last year, right, or the year before, or the year before. It's important.
Before we get too deep into it,
mm-hmm,
need to get educated.
Yep.
A lot of people think this CWD, game farms and deer farmers are the people to blame. You got any input on that?
You know, I think when you look back early on, before people really knew what CWD was, I'd say with a certain amount of confidence that game farms were moving some of these animals around that harbor the disease. I wouldn't deny that. I think they've really cleaned up their act in the past 10 or 15 years, and they have their testing protocol for those animals, and I think that's cleaned that up quite a bit. Some people think game farms are the complete devil, and they're 100% responsible for the spread of disease. You can look at the state of Illinois, where they got 16 positive counties. They've never had a single captive cervid test positive for CWD. You can go to states like Wyoming and Arkansas, where they have 23% prevalence rates, where they've never had a single game farm. So, you know, there is, you know, like I said, there's no, I'm sure it goes both ways, okay? They say it's a frequency of contact disease is what a lot of people think. How many times do those animals have to contact each other to make it happen? I can tell you one thing that's very interesting is that there, as far as I understand it, there are no more federal indemnity funds when you have a CWD captive cervid farm, which means there's no more federal money to pay you to depopulate that farm, which means if you're a captive cervid farmer and your herd tests positive for CWD,
it's all on you.
It's on you. Some of these places are going to continue to operate with a single fence, okay? There will be contact between the captive cervids and the wild deer. I'm sure the wild deers pass it into the fence if it works like that. The captive deer pass it out of the fence when it works like that. My guess we'll find some CWD in central Minnesota there where they found the 2 positives out there around Brainerd. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out, but there's a lot of information out there. I don't think they are the devil. I think they were responsible. I think a lot of government moving animals. We still got state game organizations that are transporting untested elk all across the country for restocking programs. A lot of people think they have a lot to do with spreading the disease around the country and around Canada. I would agree with that. You know, they still drive elk out of Wind Cave that's got a 40% prevalence rate, I think, among some of their elk bulls. And when the park gets too full, they drive them into Custer and relocate them. So there's a lot of ways CWD gets spread. Dirty carcasses. We don't have any signs on the borders to stop dirty carcasses. Our county highway departments throw what possibly could be CWD infected deer on public lands across the state of Minnesota. Our own DNR takes deer that have not received their CWD test results back yet and throws them on public hunting areas. So there are a ton of ways CWD can be spread. There's no real proof of how it's spread, but the captive cervid thing is going to remain a hot button for a great many people. But I think there's a lot more to it than a lot of people think about and read about. And I got way too much time invested in it.
Right.
So.
You know, the deer farmers, I feel bad for them too, because we don't know if that's where it came from. But now people are talking about this double fencing. You were saying before that to put another fence around 40 acres was how much? $20,000?
$20,000 to do a lineal mile of 8-foot game fence.
Right.
Yeah.
And these are the guys that are, a lot of them are providing our urines, our scents, all of our products that we as hunter are buying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're buying them,
So step back for a second. If CWD is this huge killing thing, and I'm not trying to say it's not a big deal, because it is.
Yep.
It's a horrible, horrible disease and nobody wants it. But the federal government is going to allow captive cervid farms to have a single fence where they exist. Okay? They don't have any money to indemnify those things. Only 2 out of 24 states, provinces are saying that we're going to aggressively monitor for this disease. If it was a huge, huge deal, nobody's done a good enough job of proving it to make the government want to take care of anybody or the deer. It's not happening. You know, Minnesota and Illinois are trying it. I hope we get it out of here again with this hot zone. But I think the public of Minnesota needs to make sure they got their boots in the ground and their head out of the sand and in the sky and looking and saying, here's our plan. You know, right now history says our plan is going to be Zone 3. 603 is going to be all of Zone 3. It's going to be 8 to 10 deer per square mile. It's going to be no yearling buck protection. There'll be pockets of good hunting, but the cold spots, the public lands,
They're gonna be bad.
kiss them goodbye.
Yep.
Whitewater will be a train wreck if it gets found over there. You won't find deer in there. And that's a tremendous public hunting spot. That's what history says. That's the direction we're going right now.
Yep. So anyways, that's everything here. We want to thank Brooks for coming on our show. And if you guys want to do, if you want your voice heard, you want to find out who or what route you should go, you can visit MDDI's Facebook or their website. Brooks got a list of your legislators and places that you can go and get your voice heard. Just don't stand idly by, no matter what side of the fence you're on. Voice your opinion. But for all of us here at Faded Camo, thanks for watching. Thank you, Brooks, for coming on the show.
Thanks for coming over, guys.